So I want to welcome you to taking this course. I'm excited for us to get started and learn a lot of cool hard surface modeling techniques, as well as kind of figuring out how we can create some really neat materials and textures for this asset and really any asset. And then taking this model from conception to completion, rendering out some high quality images, and even bringing it into a AAA game engine. But before we can do any of that, I wanted to first take this as an opportunity for us to get a little bit familiar with the software we're going to be using and some of the resources that we may need to follow along with this project. So throughout this course, we're going to be using Blender for a majority of it. I'm using Blender 3.6 in this course, and that's going to handle most of the modeling part of the project. We're then going to be taking this into Substance Painter, which is a texturing application. Now in the course, I use Substance Painter 2020. If you have an older version, I believe most, if not all of the things we're going to be covering should work. And obviously anything after 2020 should most likely be able to handle what we cover in this course. Now, as for the game engine that we're going to be using, we're going to use Unreal Engine 5.0.3. However, we only really cover Unreal Engine rather lightly towards the end of the course, so it's really not super crucial that you have this version or later. If you wanted to use an earlier version, that's going to be okay. Now, throughout our time with Blender, we're going to be using a couple of add-ons. Now, all the add-ons that we use are completely free, so you don't have to go and pay extra money if you don't want to. But I just want to make sure that I show you where to actually get these first before we start actually modeling things out. So the first one we're going to be using is Texel Density Checker. Now, if you're not familiar with most of those words, don't worry about it. We're going to cover that in the series. But this is going to be a pretty useful tool for us once we get to the UV unwrapping for our model. Now, I'll provide the URL for this website, so you can go ahead and grab that just in the resources section of the project. And you're just going to want to also kind of read the README section to make sure that the version you're getting is also compatible with the version of Blender you're using if you're not using 3.6 for this course. So how you actually go and get this asset is if you come over here to the name a fair price section, you can see that it says $10+. That's just a suggestion. And if you do have some extra money lying around, I would recommend maybe throwing a couple dollars to the author here. This is a very useful add-on. But you can see over on the left-hand side, it really is actually $0+. So if you wanted to, you can just go hit 0. And then this will say something like buy or purchase or something, but I've already gone ahead and done that. So it will say purchase again for me. And then once you do that, you'll be able to go and download a zip file. So go ahead and download that zip file and keep it as a zip file and store it in a place that you're generally not going to be touching or moving or deleting files, kind of like an add-on folder for Blender if you wanted to make a custom one. And now the second add-on that we're going to be taking a look at actually comes with Blender default. So let's just head on over to Blender and take a look at installing and enabling these add-ons. Let's go on to Edit and Preferences. That'll bring up our Preferences dialog here. Let's go on down to Add-ons. And this is where all of the add-ons will go that come with Blender, or if we go and actually install some. So let's first install that zip folder that we just downloaded for Texel Density Checker. So go on up to the install button and navigate to the add-ons folder where you actually stored this zip file. In my case, it's going to be Blender add-ons, but it'll be different for you. So I want to go on down to find Texel Density, and we can see I've got a couple versions here. But go ahead and select the version that you've downloaded. If you're following closely with this course, it should be the 2023 version. And then click on Install Add-on. And so what that's going to do is pop up this little dialog here, so we can see that we have correctly installed it. But to actually enable it, we need to just click on this little checkbox. So once we click on that, everything kind of becomes, highlighted white. We might have some extra options pop up down here. That means that this add-on is now enabled. So the second add-on I want to take a look at, like I said, comes with Blender default. So let's go and just click on the X and start to search. And I'm going to type in loop. And what we're looking for here is mesh loop tools. So we'll just click to enable that. And just quickly, what this add-on actually does is adds a little bit of extra modeling operations that we can do relatively easily. And quite frankly, I use loop tools for every single project I ever do in Blender. It's just such a nice convenience add-on. So I'd recommend even using it outside of just this project. So now let's just take this opportunity to quickly get a little bit familiarized with how to navigate in the software, because throughout the course, I do touch on it from time to time, but I want to make sure there's a consolidated area in this course where we can learn or remind ourselves how to actually navigate in the software. So with Blender, within our 3D viewport here, we can see we've got this grid, we've got some axes with the X and the Y, we've got this little 3D cursor here, which can be pretty useful in the modeling process. But to actually navigate in this software, there's a couple of different kind of hotkeys we're going to want to know. The first one to kind of orbit around in our 3D viewport is going to be middle mouse button, and just click and hold that. So I'm holding the middle mouse, and also you can take a look down here. This is essentially mirroring the keys that I'm pressing on my keyboard and mouse. So middle mouse button, click, and I can orbit around. Now, if I want to start kind of panning the view and moving around, if I hold down Shift and then middle mouse click, now I can start to move my view kind of around a little bit more, not just around one central point. If I want to go ahead and zoom, I can also just scroll up or down. And to smooth zoom, if I hold down Control and now middle mouse click and move my mouse up and down, you can see that I'll have the ability to smoothly move like that. Now, it would be awesome if every software had the same exact navigation and we could just learn one and then just start to use all of them. But unfortunately, that is not the case for pretty much everything. Every software has its own way to navigate, and it can be pretty kind of frustrating because you start to use muscle memory from one software and another, and it just doesn't work. Here in Substance Painter, that is also the case. It does not operate the same as Blender does. So in order to orbit around, like we'd seen in Blender, what I would like to do is hold down Alt, and you can actually see in the bottom left, now that I'm holding down Alt, it does give you a couple of reminders or like quick hints on how to do certain types of navigation. So when in doubt, hold down Alt or Control and kind of look towards the bottom left. It will give you a bit of a reminder. But to orbit, holding down Alt and then left clicking, you can see it changes my mouse cursor and it starts to orbit around kind of wherever our central pivot is here. Now to pan, again, holding down Alt, I'm going to middle mouse button, and that's going to allow us to kind of pan off to the side and move our view around whatever our 3D model is here. And just like in Blender, if we wanted to go ahead and zoom in and out, I can scroll up or down. Now for me, it's inverted, but that will be a setting you can go and play with in the preferences of Substance Painter, most likely. And if you would like to smooth zoom, again, holding down Alt and right clicking, you can see that I'll get that smooth zoom. And finally, here in Unreal Engine, the navigation coincidentally actually is relatively similar to Substance Painter, one of the rare occurrences where that actually happens. And this project here is actually the final result that we're going to be taking a look at throughout this course. So hopefully this is a little bit of inspiration and something to look forward to as we're making our way through the project. So with that said, in order for us to start to orbit, if I hit Alt and left click, I'll orbit around our scene, whatever our selection or, kind of like central pivot is. To start to pan, if I hit Alt and middle mouse, you can see that I'll be able to start to pan there. Now I believe I don't even need to hit Alt, I can actually just middle mouse press as well, and that also works. But, muscle memory, I generally tend to use Alt as well. And finally, scrolling in and out can zoom our camera, and hitting Alt and right clicking will allow us to smooth zoom. And lastly, just a little bit of a disclaimer. Throughout a couple of the earlier episodes in this series, my screencast keys actually did get cut off, and I didn't realize it until a little bit later in. Now, fortunately, I do pretty much say all of the hotkeys that I'm using when I'm going ahead and using them, but if there is an instance where I've used a hotkey, it doesn't show up, and I didn't say what it is, and you're not really sure what I've done, please feel free to just leave a comment down below and I'll make sure to answer with the hotkey that I used. And now with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started building this tire tread.